Hey there, it is Megan. I'm back with more of my life story. This is really just for those of you who want to get to know me more. Maybe you're a current client of mine, maybe you're thinking about working with me. It's also just a way for me to record for the catalogs of time, so to speak, who I am, where I came from, and what my story is, and how have I gotten here to this place in September of 2025, which actually, as I record this, it's October of 2025, just fresh into October. I think the first recording I did was back in August, and I got stirred by watching Shiny Happy People Season 2 to share my story. Shiny Happy People Season 2 highlights an organization called Teen Mania Ministries. The subtitle of the season is A Teenage Holy War. And I'm moved. I don't know what else to say. I'm moved to talk about the narrative that I grew up with. I'm moved to talk about some of the evolutions of understanding that I have come to as an adult. And I hope to continue evolving. I hope that when I share my story when I'm 70, 35 years from now, that I'm sharing something even more real, even more honest, even more transparent, because I've come to a more clear understanding of why I was born to the family I was born to, why I went through the things I did as a kid, and why I'm here today. So, yeah. And this is my time where I want to encourage you to share your story, because you were born where you were born for a reason. You were born to the family you were born to for a reason. The things that happened to you that were completely and totally outside of your control as a kid, and as a baby, as an infant, as a child, as a teenager, as a preteen, as a teenager, and in your early adulthood, many of those things happened to you completely outside of your control. And the conditioning that came with that life that you were born into is very real. And Don Miguel Ruiz, the author of The 4 Agreements, a book that has made a huge difference in my life, he would explain this conditioning as a domestication. You were and are domesticated into being a member of the family. You're domesticated into being a member of society. You're domesticated into being someone who, if you were born in the United States, has a social security number and is a part of the system, so to speak. And the way that you get domesticated, the way that you get conditioned, has impacts on the rest of your life. And I believe that part of our maturing process is to decondition ourselves. It is to come back to the essence of who we are, to remember that we were born without conditioning. We were born without domestication. We were born pure. We were born holy. We were born with an essence of truth. And in the first 7 years of our life, we go through things that impact us for the rest of our life. Richard Rudd is a poet, and he wrote a book called The Gene Keys. And in the Gene Keys and in the sequences inside the Gene Keys, he talks about the 3 different stages of development, from 0 to 7 and 8 to 14 and 15 to 21, these 7-year increments. And this isn't just something Richard came up with. This is something that various, psychologists have come up with, various childhood development people have come up with. And, the basis of the rest of our life in 3 different areas: mental, emotional, and physical. And when I say physical, I just mean the essence of needing to be taken care of. In this book, Love, it's a guide to the Venus sequence inside of the Gene Keys. Richard writes about the 3 different stages of development as a child. First and foremost, just as a reminder, our cells in our body regenerate every 7 years. So the cells that you had in your body 7 years ago are not the same cells that you have in your body today. It's one of the years we can look at these, it's one of the reasons why we can look at these 7-year cellular cycles. So there is the cycle that exists from birth, emerging from the womb, through 7 years old. During this first 7-year cellular cycle, it is our physical bodies that are imprinted with specific patterns. Some philosophies, maybe even like just perspectives or worldviews, might call these sanskaras. These sanskaras unconsciously dominate a lot of our life, and we do get them imprinted on us. It is this, these specific patterns that get imprinted into our physical body that happen from age 0 to 7. And then from age 8 to 14, we're really looking at like the astral body, which the astral body is the body that of our self that, relates to our emotions, our desires, it's the time that we're hitting puberty. It's the time that we're starting to discover a little bit more of like what we want in life, right? Before then, it's like we are here and we're enjoying and we're doing our best, but we don't really have any like desires other than to take care of ourselves or to be taken care of physically. But in that 8 to 14, we really start to see emotion and desire begin to pop up. And then the mental body is what comes about from ages 15 to 21. So the physical body, 0 to 7. The emotional body, so to speak, or the astral body from 8 to 14, and then the mental body from 15 to 21. So I share that with you because the domestication, the conditioning that happens at these various times in our life have an impact on us for the long run. And we don't really begin to, I don't believe we really can begin to even see our conditioning until probably around what we would some of us would call our Saturn return, which is like around 29, 30 years old. And the reason that's the case is because a whole 7-year cycle has been complete after the initial like ending of childhood, right? Not teenage years, but like 20, 21 years old. There's a reason, let's talk about it. There's a reason why most kids are graduating high school in the US around 17 or 18, going to college for 4 years and getting out of college around 21, 22 years old. There's a reason for that. Add another 7 years onto that and you're at 29 years old and you're hitting this kind of, okay, I've lived a little life outside of the conditioning that was kind of forced upon me or that I didn't really have a conscious awareness of. And I have the opportunity now to be conscious. Not that you don't have an opportunity to be conscious as a teenager or in your 20s, you do, but I have the opportunity to be conscious in a new way about my life and about what I want, about what I think, and about who I am as an adult. And so this time period is so critical around that 29 to 30 year old range. I'm wrapping up my second 7-year cycle since graduating college, basically, right? Like, so if you think about, or like thinking about years, I'm turning 36, or I'm 36 this year. So 14 years ago, I was 22. I had just started on my path outside of these first 21 years of life. And so now I've had these kind of 2 full cycles, and I had a very real revelation, so to speak, about who I am, what I was about 7 years ago, and I'm having a very real revelation about who I am and what I'm about at this juncture 7 years later, and I get to share it with you. So that's why we're here. I wrapped up episode 1, so if you haven't went and watched episode 1, go watch it. But I wrapped up episode 1 talking about my salvation process, basically. And I kind of scoff, or I have that like laugh or that little breath that happens when I say salvation process, because the story I wrapped up with in the first episode of my life story was, or first part of it, was me in junior high going to give my heart to Jesus because I was in pain, because I was struggling, because I felt like I was suffering, and that I wanted help. I wanted salvation. I wanted hope. And the aha that I had as I reflected on that moment was that up until that point, I had always felt connection to God. That I didn't feel up until that point like I needed saving, that something was missing, right? It was the awareness of something missing that caused me to want to be saved and to ask for a deeper or a relationship with Jesus. So when you think about it that way, when I think about it that way, I think then about salvation being this thing that we always have access to 24/7. And that in moments of pain, in moments of suffering, in moments of struggle, in moments of confusion, chaos, darkness, feeling lost, we can call on help at any time. And that calling on of help by the divine is not, or from the divine, is not a one-time I asked for help and now it's all done forever and ever, amen. It is I'm going to now know and practice this calling on of help. That I'm going to make asking for help and surrendering to the divine a part of my daily practice, because I have no power within myself to fix or hold a standard of living and a standard of quality of life and mind and spirit and emotions without some outside help. And we can get into what that outside help actually is and like how I call on it and how I feel about that surrender process. But I think the most important thing for me to emphasize here at this point in juncture is that I realize one of the most important things about my Christian faith and my Christian upbringing was that when I was in junior high and I asked Jesus for salvation, I didn't realize that that was going to be just one of many times that I call on him for help. And that moment, May, whatever it was, 2008, no, that's not right, 2002, whatever day it was in May of 2002, that was just the first of many times I would be needing help and asking for guidance. So after I had that experience, this supposed salvation experience in junior high, things went downhill. I continued to struggle with self-loathing. I struggled with self-harm. I struggled with eating disorders, choosing to be anorexic and bulimic, and using my pain or my depression, using the dark activities, so to speak, that I was engaging in to bring myself closer to another human. So toward my best friend who was also dealing with those same things. I felt like I was using, in retrospect, right? I can see that I was using some of these things to create a bond with a friend. And it worked. It worked until it didn't. And the reason it stopped working was because inside of that bond, there was such a codependent type of relationship there. I felt seen by this person. I also felt like I could see her, but we were seeing each other in our pain. right? As, 13, 14-year-olds. We were seeing each other in our pain and using that to connect. And as a result, it kind of isolated us from the rest of the friend group. And we would exchange notes back and forth. And I remember one day my friend Melissa intercepted a note that I had shared with Ashley, or vice versa, that Ashley had shared with me. And that note got delivered to one of the admins there at our school. And by the way, the school I went to is Christian Heritage Academy, and I'm sure that's going to be the majority of what I talk about today in terms of kind of the worldview, the upbringing, the philosophy of this school. But the admin that received that note felt her responsibility was to let our parents know. So Ashley's parents get a copy of this note, my parents get a copy of this note, and next thing I know, I'm sitting in the admin office talking to Miss Johnson, being told, hey, your parents know about this note, Ashley's parents know about this note, we all know about what you're doing, the self-harm threats and or activities, the eating disorders. This is not a healthy friendship for y'all to be in. And it's up to your parents, but something's going to change. And so I remember being told basically like, hey, no more sharing notes with Ashley. You guys need to separate yourself. You need to do your own thing. You need to stop talking to one another. And that was the first of, I can count in my life up till 21 and in my development years. That was the first of 4 friends or close people in my life that I was asked to not engage with by the authorities, by my parents or by the school or by whoever was over me. And I'll share about the other 3, but Ashley was the first that I was asked or told, you cannot engage with her anymore. You guys are not friends anymore. And that was hard because we were on the same volleyball team. We both played basketball. We had spent the summer together. We had talked on the phone a lot. We were exchanging notes multiple times a day. This was my first friend, really. I mean, I had other friends, but it was like my first bond, with someone outside of like my family. And so for that to be taken away, I now know how difficult that was on me and what kind of a change that made in my life. And it did make a big, big change because I had a big, big change to make in my life. And so I just went headfirst into youth group. So growing up at this church that my parents had moved us to from Sooner Road Church of God, you can learn about that in episode 1, to Bethel Church Choctaw, there as an interdependent church, interdependent faith, or interdependent interdenomination, that's the word I'm looking for, interdenomination church. The youth group was thriving. They had their own building. We had basketball courts, we had volleyball courts, we had blaring music from all the speakers in like the community area. We had a concession stand. We had the worship center. We had games and activities and, Sunday school classes that were just designated for us, and then Wednesday night youth group that was just designated for us. And yeah, I mean, it was a whole production, I loved going to youth group, and I poured myself into youth group as a result of, I believe, as a result of being removed from my relationship with Ashley. My desire to be full on committed, my desire to be in relationship got me into church at a deeper level than I had been before. And of course, it's at this like really pivotal time, 13, 14 years old, where it makes sense for me to be really involved in youth group. And so I get really involved in youth group. And I remember sitting this was a bigger church, by the way. So like my previous church was really small. I only had a few friends. They were the pastor's kids. This was a lot of teenagers, a lot of kids, different people all the time, new people I didn't know. But there were some kids, some teenagers that were there regularly and consistently, and I began to build friendships with. And I remember sitting on a Wednesday night in church on the front row, maybe the second to front row, with my journal and my paper, my pen and paper, my Bible, and I'm sitting next to this girl. And I just remember brushing my arm against her arm. That was it. And I just had this like flood of feelings come over me, like it was my first, I guess you would call it first sexual awakening, it just was this like flood of like, I feel something. And it was like in my chest and in my stomach, and it gave me butterflies, and it felt nice, and it felt intriguing, and felt interesting, and like all of these things. And it's not that I hadn't touched people before, right? I mean, I'm sure I had many hugs and many handshakes and whatever, but this was different. And it's not like anything led up to that moment. It just happened. And so I'm having this moment with this girl next to me, and it's kind of one of those moments where, the other person feels the same, it's not just like I'm having this moment. It's kind of like you like glance over and you're like, are they having this moment too? And then you're just like, oh, this is like interesting, but confusing. And also like, what the heck, and so nothing needed to be said between us. When you're 14 years old having this experience, like nothing needs to be said, but it's happening. And it feels good and it feels nice, and then you want to spend more time together, and you want to talk more, and you want to get to know each other more, and you want to have that arm brush more and more, right? So that's what 8th grade was, at least for a few months. And me and Katrina spent a lot of time together, and her cousins also came to the church, and my brother, I think, was dating one of her cousins, or eventually dated one of her cousins. And Katrina and I don't know how long it was, because the most memorable things I remember, the things I remember the most are the beginning and the end, so I don't really remember a lot of the in-between. I remember a few things about the in-between, because it was part of my sexual awakening, and it was this thing that I'll tell you, people have asked me this before. Like, did you ever feel like God didn't love you because you were attracted to a woman? And the answer is no. And that's the truth. Like, I never felt like God didn't love me. From the moment I'm in church, listening to the youth pastor preach, I'm going to Sunday school, I'm studying the Bible, I'm all in, and I'm having this arm brush emotion, sexual awakening with this woman, with this girl. No, not even then. Not even then did I feel like something is wrong, It just was what it was. There was nothing wrong. And it wasn't until her mom walked in the bedroom on a Sunday morning. So I had stayed the night at Katrina's house on Saturday night. We were going to go to church on Sunday morning. She lived very close to the church. And we were like cuddled up in bed really close to one another, just like enjoying each other's like closeness. And the tension was in the air, because it was a sexual tension, not just a hug, I love you, energy. And her mom walked in the room, and her mom could tell, like the energy in the room was sexual, and her mom could tell. And that was the end of Katrina and I, because then she tells my mom and dad and the youth pastor and the pastor, and by that afternoon after church, I'm in a meeting with the pastor and my parents, and it's like, no more relationship with Katrina. This is not allowed. You guys just cannot talk anymore. Do not hang out alone. Avoid each other and at youth group, don't hang out in the same circles. Find your own way. This is not holy. It's not okay. It's not accepted. And you need to cut it out. So what do you do when you're 14? I mean, you just have to go with it. I mean, what else are you going to do? So yeah, I went with it. She went with it. We went with it. I stopped talking to Katrina. It was painful. It was hurtful. I did not like that, but I did what I was told. I began clinging to the children's pastor, who was an older woman. You could consider her maybe like just an older sister or something like that. I wasn't sexually attracted to her, but I felt connected to her because she had reached out to me. I don't know if she did that on her own or if someone asked her to or whatever, but it doesn't matter. Amy started reaching out to me, asking like, hey, do you want to go to coffee? Do you want to like chat? Here's a book to read. And we kind of created a relationship where it was like mentor-mentee kind of thing. And I felt very supported. I felt very loved. I felt very cared for. I felt like I grew a lot during that time and during that season. So the rest of 8th grade, 9th grade, I'm sure into 10th grade and 11th grade, her and I were spending quite a bit of time together. And I was learning all the things that there was for me to learn as a teenager. And I didn't have any more sexual awakenings or sexual desires even. I felt like I just repressed all of my sexuality down, and I said, you know what, if the only time I feel what I feel is brushing my arm up against a girl and I'm not supposed to feel that way with a girl, then I will just dedicate my whole life to Jesus. I'll dedicate my whole life to God. I'll dedicate my whole life to ministry, and I will study the Bible, and I will study books, and I will study books about the Bible, and I will prepare sermons, and I will offer to volunteer in children's ministry and in the nursery, and I will volunteer to go on mission trips, and I just will give my whole life to God, because obviously the sex thing, the sexual desire, the relationships, the connections, the physical side of me and the emotional side of me are not safe here, right? Like I just need to it needs to not exist. And so that's what happened, is it just didn't exist. I was able to give myself so much over to the ministry that it was almost like its own fulfillment sensually. It sounds really weird to say about ministry, but I felt that connected to ministry. I felt like it was that important to me. And I felt fulfilled. I felt joy. I felt happy. I felt grateful. I felt bliss even. I felt excitement. Learning new things, having new revelations, having new ahas, being able to connect dots, being able to learn new things in scripture and in, the understanding and the studies of the Bible and of the Christian faith. And so, yeah, I mean, that's what I did for the rest of my high school years, really, until I started dating a boy my senior year in high school. Maybe it was like late junior year, maybe, but I'll get there. So instead of going further into sports like a lot of my friends did, volleyball, basketball, etc., I actually leaned out of sports. I'm sure part of it was because Ashley was playing sports and I was told I couldn't be around her. So I was just like, well, I'll just go over here and do church stuff, But my school was still an important part of my upbringing. So yes, I was giving myself over to my faith and really participating in church quite a bit. But I also showed up for school every day. And at this school, Christian Heritage Academy, we had government classes. We had law classes, like the rudiments of the government and law. We had Bible classes, of course. We had history classes, of course. English classes. Yes, we had science and math and algebra and geometry and trig and biology and all these things. But I was more of a history, English, Bible, government kind of gal, and less so the biology and science and math. I passed, but that was about it. So at Christian Heritage Academy, the mission statement of the organization, of the school, is to restore America's Christian Republic. So here are some of the things from the CHA website. And remember that I was a part of this organization or school from kindergarten all the way till I graduated high school. So the vision of Christian Heritage is to train American Christian leaders for every sphere of society. They define each element of that. Who is a leader? A leader is one who influences others. A leader is a person of influence. Leadership is following in advance of others, following someone or something, looking over your shoulder and seeing that others are following you. Leadership is more about who you are rather than what you do. Leadership is dependent on character. That's how they define a leader. Who is a Christian leader? A Christian leader is one who influences others for and toward Christ. A Christian leader is not just a leader who is a Christian, but is a leader who is following after Christ and leading others in that pursuit. Paul said, "Follow my example as I follow the example of Christ." Who is an American Christian leader? An American Christian leader is a Christian leader who knows America's God-given gospel purpose to be a great missionary nation. Pilgrim Governor William Bradford of Plymouth, in stating their reasons for coming to the New World, said the following: "Last and not least, they cherished a great hope and inward zeal of laying good foundations, or at least making some ways toward it, for the propagation and advance of the gospel of the kingdom of Christ in the remote parts of the world, even though they should be but stepping stones to others in the performance of so great a work. We are those who perform so great a work by using our civil, religious, and economic liberties to spread the gospel both at home and abroad." What does every sphere of society mean? In 1975, 3 Christian leaders, Bill Bright, founder of Campus Crusade for Christ, Francis Schaeffer, the Aubrey Fellowship, and Lauren Cunningham, founder of Youth with a Mission, independently identified the spheres of society and all came up with the following list, all the same: home, church, business, education, government, media, arts, and entertainment. That is the vision of Christian Heritage. What is the mission of Christian Heritage? The mission of Christian Heritage, the purpose of CHA is to assist the home and church in building a solid foundation in the life of each student, a life which is characterized by a personal salvation experience, the development of Christian character, the Christian conscience, and Christian self-government. The ultimate goal of the Academy is to produce true Christian scholars who will be used of God to propagate the gospel throughout the whole world and to restore our American Christian Republic to its historic biblical foundations. They then go to define what each of those elements mean. I'm only going to read the part at the end about, well, I'm going to read 2 parts. I'm going to read a life characterized by a personal salvation experience, because I've already told you kind of what I had a personal salvation experience at CHA in junior high, but I've also begun to explain to you why and how I now see salvation. So, in their minds, in order to become all that God intends, a person must start with salvation. There are, of course, many other important elements in a person's upbringing, but a personal relationship with Christ is the key to them all. Our emphasis begins at this point, as it opens the door to understanding and achieving the rest. And then to restore our American Christian Republic to its historic biblical foundation. This is a very important part to where we are at here today in 2025. Unfortunately, the Christian foundation and heritage of our beloved country are being ignored and quickly erased. It is our desire at Christian Heritage Academy to produce crusaders who will fight in the cause of national restoration, to defend the blessed liberty that Christianity provided in America, and to combat against those who would subvert it. So that is the mission of Christian Heritage Academy. And then the values that they mention, they say that the Word of God is one of their core values. The position of the home and the church is one of their core values. Salvation and its effects is one of their core values. Christian scholarship, the propagation of the gospel, the restoration of America to its foundation, and excellence in teaching. So, these were the 7 core values that were in place when I was there, still in place today, and they do have a whole section. This is new, but I think it applied when I was there. They do have a whole section on their website about pursuing kingdom diversity, talking about, it appears to me, like talking about encouraging interactions across ethnic and cultural lines, that they strive to raise historically underrepresented voices on campus by working to grow a culturally and ethnically diverse faculty, staff, and student body, and that CHA will conduct professional development with faculty and staff and continue curriculum development to train students of all ethnic and cultural backgrounds. It doesn't sound like a bad school. It's not. It's not. I'm not here to tell you Christian Heritage Academy was a bad school. Christian Heritage Academy was a great school. I excelled at Christian Heritage Academy. I was the senior chaplain for my class at Christian Heritage Academy. I developed very strong relationships with my teachers and with my fellow students at Christian Heritage Academy. I graduated with many recognitions and honors at Christian Heritage Academy. I was granted a scholarship as a result of going to Christian Heritage Academy to attend school for the next 4 years at no cost to me if I stayed in the state of Oklahoma. Christian Heritage was, for all intents and purposes, a very strong school for me to go to. And I'm very grateful to have gone to Christian Heritage. My parents sacrificed a lot. They sent all 4 of us kids to private schools. Me and my older brother graduated from CHA, and my younger siblings, went to CHA and also went to another private school in the area. And there is no institution, no organization without its faults, without its shortcomings. There is no person without our faults, without our shortcomings. Christian Heritage had a very unique mission and vision. Obviously, as a Christian private school that was non-denominational, they had very unique core values around what they were about and why, and what lens they chose to view their work through. And I think all of that is very important. I would much prefer to work with people who have a lens and are willing to adjust them from time to time if needed and if asked, to be able to see new perspectives, than to work with people who are not used to having any lens at all and they just can't even see the forest for the trees kind of thing, right? That they are so caught up in what is that they have no vision, they have no mission, they have no values. And so it's not lost on me that I am a person of mission, of vision, and of values because of the way I was raised. All of my inquiries into my faith, into my spiritual practice, into my work, into my contribution to society, into my influence with others, I do work to frame them with these elements of a mission and a vision and values. Now, is it the same mission and vision? No, it's not. I'm also not running the organization Christian Heritage Academy. So I'm going to have a different mission and vision and values based upon what kind of part of my life I am working on. but there are some overarching mission. There's an overarching mission, which is to be me, full on, true and true, to decondition myself and to allow myself to go back to my essence, to allow myself to be one with God, to allow that personal salvation experience. Because I feel like, and this is the first time I'm talking about it, so you have to kind of like bear with me through the stumblings, but I feel like all of that I just read you falls short. It is so well intended. It is so well intended. It falls short for so many reasons. It falls short because the headmaster had a granddaughter who was in my brother's class, I believe, who came out as gay. And from what I heard, she was not allowed to the family functions anymore. So to me, the purpose of having a mission, a vision, and values is to live full on, to live connected, to live present, to live in love and in spirit and in truth. And turning one of your own away because of their life choices, because they choose to be themselves versus not themselves, that is not what this is about. Living full on, living in our truth, I believe, should be about more connection, about more transparency, about more truth, about more beauty, about more loveliness, about more purity, about more kindness, about more patience, about more gentleness, about more nurturing, caring, giving, sharing, about more Christ-likeness, right? And so that's not that. To me, that's not that. So that kind of swings back around to what does it mean to be a Christian, and what does it mean to have Christ be the center of your life? Who was Jesus Christ? And what are we saying when we're saying we are Christians? What are we saying? I mean, this, we can go so deep with the CHA thing, because what are we saying when we are Christians? What are we saying when we're saying we are American Christians? Because there are Christians all over the world. And then there are American Christians. And what are we even talking about when we talk about Christians? The truth of Christ extends way far beyond Christ. That Christ is a representation of the truth. That Christ is a story about what is true. That there have been many other people who have pointed to what is true. Okay, so, this whole idea of building up American Christian leaders is something I doubt I'll be able to get to the bottom of in this particular video. But I wanted to share it with you because it is so fundamental to what's happening here in 2025 and beyond in our United States of America. It's not that I believe Christian Heritage Academy and other schools like it are the reason why we have Christian nationalists. I'm not tying those that closely together, but there is a element to this. There is definitely an element to the history of America and why America is the kind of country it is, and like what kind of experiment we have been undergoing here in the United States since the Declaration of Independence and the formation of our Constitution. So the only constant is change, and how we change as a country and how we change moving forward is going to be dependent upon how we, you and I, and others show up, and how we influence, and how we lead, and how we dialogue. And so there are no others in the sense that there's someone out there who is going to save us, like, or change the way that things are going. It is us, like all of us are contributing both in implicit and explicit ways to the happenings that are occurring here in our United States of America. And so I'm going to pin that for another day and another conversation, because I want to be able to do the America's heritage justice in terms of the history, the stories, both the sad stories of colonization and certain tribes and peoples being eradicated as a result of a new government coming in. That could go really deep. And so I'll pin that for another conversation. But I think it is important, just as of knowing who I am, that's the education I was raised in. And I don't have any ill toward the education that I got. I'm very grateful for the teachers and the schooling, the classes, and the style. I am probably privileged as an individual who takes everything in context, I guess. And even though I have been deeply conditioned as a person and had to go through a lot of deconditioning, like we talked about earlier in the video, I also have been one to question and to be a little rebellious and to push against the systems a little bit. So not only did I not take everything I learned at Christian Heritage and just say, this is gospel truth and I'm going to run with it, but same thing with my church. There was a lot of things that I was being told at church, or that I was being taught at church, that I had questions about. There was a lot of things in the Bible that I would read that I had questions about. And instead of just taking some pastor or some authority's answer for truth, I would go do my own research. I would go do my own contemplation. I would go do my own meditations. I would go do my own inquiries and what I now call inner work on that, whatever that was. And come to find out, I'm still doing that work every single day, every single week. And come to find out, I know a lot more. It's not that I believe. It's not that I believe more. It's that I know more today than I ever have. It is a revelation type of knowledge when a person, I'm speaking for myself, rests in a knowing, rests in a meditation, rests in a state of receivership, in a state of peace, in terms of whatever kind of downloads come through. And so from on high. So as a teenager, I'm studying all these things. I'm not taking everything I'm learning for gospel truth. I am questioning, not out of I'm questioning for the sake of questioning. I'm questioning for the sake of truth. I'm questioning because I want to know. I'm questioning because I want to personally know. I'm not questioning because I feel like I need to prove something to someone. I'm questioning because it seemed important to me to find out what was true. And the only way I knew to find out what was true was to go to the source myself. And I want to sit with that little moment for a while, because this is a big part of my life story. A big part of my life story is going to source myself. Instead of just trusting the variations, the iterations, the types of creative expressions of someone else's version of going to source, I went to source. And I hope that you have that kind of a relationship with source yourself. And all that looks like is just learning, if I'm going to put some practicals on it, learning meditation, learning to set your thoughts aside, learning to become aware of your thoughts, that you begin to identify with the person who is aware, the self that is aware of your thoughts, not the person who is thinking the thoughts. And when you begin to practice that awareness, when you begin to practice that state of being that says, I am aware of my thoughts, I am not my thoughts, that is a profound place to be. It is definitely one step, I would say, closer to source than where most people currently sit. Most people currently sit with thinking their thoughts are them, thinking that their emotions are them, thinking that what they have been told, taught, raised with, whether the dogma or the just conditioning, the moral codes, the creeds, that these are things that are defining of who they are as a person. Well, it's just not true. You are a person underneath all of that. You're a person outside of all of that. Who is that person? Who was the person that was born? Who is the essence, the unique ability, the unique strengths, the unique essence of who you are? That's where I began my studies in my 20s that I recognized were a thing. Like that people outside of the Christian faith were doing this. I believe I was doing that in whatever, to the best of my ability in my teenage years. But even in doing that, I still felt that commitment and that call to service, to ministry, to giving, to caring, to sharing, to preparing, to speaking, to influencing, to creating experiences and moments for people to have their own unique revelations, their own unique experience with God, with Christ, with truth, with love. And that's what got me into ministry, because right here, this commitment, this call, this love, this experience of commitment to love and ministry is what led me to the Honor Academy. It is what led me to being so involved with Acquire the Fire. It's what led me to my time, there, which is what Shiny Happy People Season 2 is all about.